I was shocked to find out that in 2008, as in most previous years, did you know that 37 cents out of every tax dollar you pay goes toward military-related spending? I had no idea that it was that much. And spending on ecology and other concerns related to that, taking care of the environment, 2%, 2 cents of the tax dollar. Our spending on military, supposed defense spending, is larger than the next 45 nations combined. So if you stacked up the amount of spending in descending order, put 45 together, we spend more than the next 45 combined. We account for more than half of what the entire rest of the globe spends on military. Glenn Greenwald calls the business of military spending the most significant and under-discussed political fact in the United States, which affects every other issue that we as progressive Christians are interested in. Economists use the term opportunity cost to refer to things we can't do because we're spending that much money on the military. But we can't measure the staggering cost of military spending in terms of monetary terms alone, says Seymour Melman of Columbia University. Rather, the true cost is measured by what's been foregone, by the deterioration of the infrastructure and many other aspects of the United States, and by our inability to alleviate human wretchedness of long duration. We realize the money we spend on the military could instead be used to invest in quality public education, Social Security, health care, access to higher education for all, affordable quality child care, living wage job and career ladders, decent, safe, affordable housing, public transportation, not to speak of the retention of skilled jobs and a manufacturing base in our economy. According to the National Priorities Project, this coming fiscal year, 2011, we taxpayers in Texas will pay a total of $61 billion as our state share of the total defense spending. Now, here are some of the things that we could do with that same amount of money. For instance, 14 million people could be provided with economical quality health care. Or, we can't do all of them, this is just an example. Or, we could pay the salary of 1 million police or sheriff's patrol officers for neighborhoods that don't have enough surveillance, 1 million firefighters, 6 million scholarships for university students, 11 million Pell Grants of $5,500 each, 35 million children in low-income families could be given health care, 8 million Head Start slots. We could spend it on renewable energy, 1 million school teachers, and so on. Owing to what's called imperial overstretch, we're diverting our finances from resources that we need in those areas, resources that could better be invested in our nation's working poor families and their children. Not only have we abandoned our nation's most vulnerable people, we've abandoned the social and physical infrastructure that's required for children to grow up in safe neighborhoods with the kind of support institutions that we, in this part of Dallas, take for granted that's not present in some neighborhoods in South Dallas and in other cities. Crumbling all around us are the very things on which our national security really depends. Prospects for the full flourishing of our nation's working class young people and their families has been utterly skewered by fallout from corporate greed and vulgar excess, by a federal budget and federal policies that are devoted to American empire and expanding it, rather than enlarging the sphere of the public common good in our country and in the global commons. Empire, however, is difficult to challenge and change, not only because it creates such eye-popping differences in wealth, because it also creates and then caters to vast differentials in power. Empire is structured along the lines of this pyramid, according to lines of socioeconomic class, with power and wealth inversely proportionally related. Most of the power is at the top, and as you go down, there's less and less power in the hands of the very people who need to have say-so about how tax dollars are really spent. Most people think that the middle class is at the top of a bell curve, but in truth of fact, the working class, the forgotten class, is at the very top of that bell curve. Michael Zweig defines class not so much in terms of income, but rather in terms of power. In his book, The Working Class Majority, America's Best Kept Secret, he says, when I talk about class, I am talking about power. Power at work, power in the larger society, economic power, and also political and cultural power. Empire is predicated on and reproduced by this over-accumulated power and wealth at the top, especially the power and wealth belonging to multinational corporations and the military, industrial, congressional complex. We are accustomed to saying the rich are getting richer, but the more salient thing is they're also getting more powerful. This power is often used and abused in ways that benefit the elites but burden the masses of working class families who are really the backbone of our society. Empires colonize every institution, every corner of American society. Every day, whether we see it or not, empire is reinforced and reproduced through economic, political, social, intellectual, cultural, and other means. There are even TV screens flashing into the rooms of public school kids, spilling the messages of empire. Empire is in the very air we breathe. It's the water in which we swim but cannot see. We live in empire, empire lives in us. Even so, we're differently advantaged and differentially burdened by empire. Our lives, as I look around, as I look at my retirement savings, I've been affected by the financial crisis. I know everyone else has, but I have relatives in blue-collar working class jobs who've been much more worse how they've been affected than I have. Working class young people and their families bear the worst brunt of negative blowback and the adverse effects of empire. They and their neighborhoods, especially the neighborhoods populated by immigrants and people of color, comprise the people and places most severely abandoned by empire. Yet, despite enormous adversities, innumerable groups of so-called at-risk teenagers across the United States are standing up and defying the odds against them and are engaging in some stunning forms of transformational ministry at the margins. To my mind, when I ran across this, I thought, this is the greatest story that never gets told.